Gasly has been swapped with Alex Albon. What? Okay, so we all know that Gasly hasn't necessarily been the fastest in F1 this year, and yes, he has got a lot still to learn in the Red Bull, but come on, he's got a long way to go, and cutting Gasly off at this point of the season, I don't think it makes any sense. Let's have a look at some facts. Now, obviously, the pressure of any driver driving for Red Bull is immense. It's not like he's going to a midfield or a back of the field team to drive and then he's got no pressures to deal with whatsoever. He can actually relax into his car, into his role, and find his groove. In Red Bull, there is no such thing as finding your groove. I personally think, and it's very clear from the interviews that they have with Red Bull, that they're absolutely ruthless with their team, and that includes the drivers. And I honestly don't feel like they create a good environment for their drivers to be able to relax in and get the best from their pace, and of course the best from themselves. The other thing that doesn't really quite work for Gasly is that he's been put in right to the front of the midfield. Now, when you're battling with other drivers in the middle of the pack and at the back of the pack, it's a little bit different. The cameras are not on you, the pressures are very different, and so he's allowed to find his tune, and that's why he was so fast last year. But when racing for Red Bull, you get thrown right at the sharp end. You're competing against the likes of Max and Lewis and Bottas and Vettel. It gets really hard. And so I don't think that Gasly has found the time or has been given the opportunity to find his stride in the car yet. And he's been building up a lot of speed towards the end of the summer, but I still think it's a little bit too early. The other factor which makes it super hard for him is that Max is probably one of the hardest teammates you could ever possibly want to have as a young driver. He's just come in and he's got Max to benchmark again. So not only is Red Bull on his case, making sure that he performs to the right level, he's been benchmarked against Max. Max has been the most successful young driver of his generation, or should I say the generation before, and so benchmarking against one of the greats is already a tough call for Gasly. The thing is, drivers, when they drive for Red Bull, they know that they're in danger of being thrown out because of their performances, and they know they're being watched, and they know the pressure is super high. And so when Red Bull makes these decisions, yes, Gasly is a fast driver, but it doesn't mean to say that he's ready to deal with the pressure that Red Bull puts on their drivers from the get-go. And I think that's where the team probably made the mistake. I think Gasly needed a bit more time to settle in and a bit more time to deal with the pressures that come with a seat at Red Bull. Now, of course, this is Formula 1, and of course there's going to be pressures with the seat in every competitive team, especially towards the top end of the grid. However, some drivers are very well adapted to deal with this, such as Max, Daniel. When he went to the Red Bull, he was super competitive, beating Sebastian Vettel at the Red Bull, but it doesn't mean to say that every driver is, and I think Gasly clearly isn't one of those drivers, and I don't think he's 1 second a lap slower than Max either. There's something else going in Red Bull that just doesn't suit Gasly for some reason. But having said all of this, of course, Red Bull has the data that we don't. So me just being me, I can think whatever I want to think, but at the end of the day, Red Bull will know how much performance the drivers are getting from their cars. They've got the data, they can see their braking points, their apex speeds, they can see how much throttle they use. Alex Albon has been doing a fantastic job at Toro Rosso. Does that mean, however, that he's going to perform as well in a Red Bull? From a fan's perspective, it feels really wrong. It feels rushed, it feels abrupt, it's the wrong thing to do any time of the day. But what would know? We're fans, right? Time will tell. So is Bottas to stay at Mercedes? It hasn't necessarily been confirmed yet, but I don't see that Bottas is going to be losing his seat at Mercedes. And there's a few reasons for that. Now, this is why I personally think Bottas should stay at Mercedes. First of all, Bottas does exactly what a driver is supposed to be doing. He's also fast enough to bring points home for Mercedes, but he's not fast enough yet to challenge Lewis Hamilton on track, wheel-to-wheel racing. And as a team, of course, you want the maximum amount of points that you can possibly get in the safest way. And that's just the thing. Having two drivers that are super competitive in a car means that though driver A and driver B can bring in a lot of points home, they will probably most likely clash in the track. And the more you clash in the track, the more likely you are to not bring any points home. And at the moment, what he has with Bottas is that Bottas will trail Hamilton home every time he can. Now, of course, a good example of this is when Lewis was racing Alonso at the McLaren. We all saw what happened there. And also on Nico's last year, he was going toe-to-toe with Lewis, and we all saw what happened there. So if I was Toto Wolff, what would I do? I would keep Bottas. Why? because it is a tried and tested option. Moving on, we have Ocon replacing Nico at Renault. Or do we? Now, Nico is a very well respected driver, loved by all, loved by the paddock and the fans alike. His performances are strong too. But unfortunately for Nico, things just haven't worked out the way they could have potentially worked out for him. He's always been in the shadows of F1, I think. And sadly, to highlight this, he's never even had a podium in his entire career in Formula 1, which is a real shame given that we all know how good Nico can be behind the wheel of a Formula 1 car. It just feels like, in a weird way, Nico has become part of the Formula 1 furniture. It's a shame to say, but it's the truth. I think Nico has become part of the furniture. And the thing is, I don't think necessarily that Ocon, though he's good, I don't think he's that white shining warrior in his horse coming in with speed beyond and above this world that's going to make and break F1 with pace comparable to Max either. And there's a big question mark as to whether we think that Ocon is actually better than Nico at all, which I don't think that he is. But one can argue that Nico did have his chance in Formula 1, and so Formula 1 would be Formula 1 without rotating drivers, and Ocon has been waiting patiently for a year, though some drivers have waited a lot longer, and perhaps it is a chance to give Ocon a go at Renault anyway. So let's talk a little bit about Russell leaving Williams now. Leaving Williams? What? Yeah, well, it turns out that there is speculation in the media that indeed Russell could leave Williams. I don't know why that's come about. I don't think it's anything more than speculation, but hey, F1 wouldn't be F1 if we weren't speculating about it. So let's talk about facts a little bit, shall we? Russell last year signed a 3-year contract with Williams. He's hardly fulfilled his first contract, so by definition of contracts, he's got at least another 2 years to go. Also, rumor has it, and rumor seems to dominate things around here, that the team are actually quite happy with, unless, of course, there is a bit of a dark horse here, or a joker card, and the joker card could be that there could be a multi-millionaire driver with huge cash fund from somewhere coming into the team, and I think that would be the only reason to not give good old Russell his place. If a driver comes in with enough sponsors from somewhere in the millions, they could probably dislodge Russell from his seat at Williams. But like with many things in F1, we shall wait and see what happens. So we wouldn't have rumors in F1 without talking about good old Alonso. What is up with him? Now obviously we don't know why the rumors are true, and F1 wouldn't be F1 without rumors, but let's just have a look at some of the rumors going around in the media today. Now, the first thing is, we know from certain sources, or should I call them at this point gossip, that Mercedes were potentially talking to Alonso about replacing Bottas for 1 year. I don't think that's gonna happen, but hey, who knows, right? Nobody guessed that Hamilton would be joining Mercedes. There was also a really weird rumor about Alonso joining Ferrari, although I don't really see how that's going to happen, because you've got Charles Leclerc in there, and I would not change Charles for anything. And Vettel, though he's not performing the best, is Vettel and he's still there. I personally think that Ferrari is locked out, and I would not see Alonso going into Ferrari anytime soon. It just wouldn't make any sense with their current driver lineup at the moment. Alonso, of course, might also be heading for McLaren, and that is a probability. Now, Alonso did say that he wouldn't drive for any other team unless the team worked to be competitive, and at this point in age in his career, I don't think Alonso really cares too much about what team he drives for. As long as the team is capable of winning races, I think Alonso will be more than up for it. And given, of course, McLaren's current boost in performance this year, going into next year, if they carry on with this progression of pace, I honestly think that maybe Alonso might be interested in having a little go again before he retires for the last time. Alonso for sure is still one of the fastest drivers in Formula 1 out there today, and I genuinely think that if he was in a competitive car, he would give anybody a run for their money. I think that if he was paired with somebody like Max Verstappen, he would give Max Verstappen a run for his money, and he would probably win a championship. So the conclusion is, where is Alonso going to, if anywhere? No idea, but I think it's very unlikely for him to make it into any of the top 3 teams for next year. The most likely pace, however, is McLaren, and if he can be 4th just behind the big 3, then I don't think he would mind that too much. That's it from me in the silly season so far.